Welcome to OncoPharm. I'm your host, John Bazar. I am a professor of pharmacy practice here at the supporting sponsor of OncoPharm, ETSU's Bill Gatton College of Pharmacy. It is September 4th, 2025. It's September. And we, you gotta love the title of this episode. But before we get to Cilta-Cel, I want to talk about, I did some interviews last week for people applying to pharmacy school here. And I interviewed two applicants, and both of these students, if you're applying to pharmacy school, you're going to get two questions. Why do you want to be a pharmacist? Why do you want to become a pharmacist by going to this school? Okay. Both of these students, their answers had to do with impactful encounters they had either personally or with family with a pharmacist. And one of them was with an oncology pharmacist. And that inspired them to become pharmacists, which is wonderful. And that's worth celebrating by itself. All of you who are doing great things as pharmacists, get out there, talk to patients, let them know all the things you do, because it does raise gets more eyes on the wonderful things we do, especially in oncology pharmacy. But let's talk about Cilta-Cel and a little Cilta-Celebration. This is not necessarily new data that I'm talking about in CARTitude-1. This was presented at maybe ASH, maybe ASCO, but the publication of the 5-year follow-up somewhat recently was actually published in print in JCO, but it was actually back in June. And I saw it, and I don't do CAR-T here. We don't do CAR-T, so I didn't look a lot into it. But what caught my attention was, as an American Society of Clinical Oncology member, ASCO, I get the ASCO post delivered in print to my house. There's no way not to get it in print, but it comes to my house, and usually I stay on top of this stuff. I have a whole podcast devoted to it, so I think I know everything that's going on. Obviously, I don't. And what caught my eye below the fold was the word cure with Cilta-Cel. I was like, wow. And so this is, I think I've said this on the podcast before, but if you talk to multiple myeloma experts, they often talk about how we think maybe we can cure this disease. If you talk to everybody else, again, it's generally, we say it's not a disease that we consider to be curable with what we have right now. And so that word cure with Cilta-Cel caught my eye. And so I went back and looked at this publication. And this is CARTitude-1. This was the original ciltacabtagene autoleucel, or Cilta-Cel, that kind of got, it's an accelerated approval end of 97 based on response rate, where we're using this drug. And this is 5+ year follow-up of CARTitude-1. So this was 97 patients. They all had to have been exposed to an IMiD, so an immune modulatory drug like lenalidomide, a proteasome inhibitor like bortezomib, and daratumumab. And in fact, 88% were refractory to 3 classes. Some were even penta-class refractory. And this is looking at long-term follow-up. This is a single-arm study, so there's not a lot you can really take about superiority versus anything else in a single-arm study. There is no comparison. But after 61.3 months of median follow-up, the median overall survival was 60.7 months. And this is a heavily treated population, as you see. Now, of these 97 patients, 32, which is 33%, are alive without progression for more than 5 years without maintenance. So you're not getting any drug for your myeloma, and your disease is not there. Well, that's a long-term durable remission. We would use that same term to describe those folks with CML on TKIs that have a treatment-free remission. And we are in oncology. I think in the general public, people are a little afraid to use the C word, cancer, in common talk. And in oncology circles, we're a little afraid to use the C word, cure, because we've all seen someone who has been told that they're cured and their disease comes back. I've seen metastatic seen hormone-positive breast cancer recurrence 21 years after original treatment. I've seen multiple myeloma come back about 20 years later. And you do see these late recurrences, and you're like, gosh, that's devastating, especially these people are walking around when they think they're cured. And there's that fine line between hope and reality that we all walk when we look in oncology. But they are throwing around the word cure here with these results of Cilta-Cel, which is really exciting and highlights the potential that these drugs might be curative. And we talked about the potential of mRNA vaccine last week, and potential is wonderful. That's how we move things forward. What further got people excited is this is a multi-center study, and one of the centers, I don't know which one, but I'm sure it's probably on X or whatever. One of these centers had 12 patients, or one of these centers was doing serial minimal or measurable residual disease testing, all these folks. And in 12 of these people that were without disease and in remission, they were MRD negative at the level of 10 to the fifth for 5 years. So there's 5 years, there's no evidence of disease whatsoever, even with the best test that we have. And that is making people really excited that maybe we can cure these folks with Cilta-Cel. A couple things. It is a single-arm study. There is no comparison. And like I said, I've seen people with multiple myeloma relapse more than 20 years later without being on treatment. There is a possibility that if we had MRD times 10 to the 6th or to the 7th, we could see this. And with every year, our magnifying glasses to look for measurable residual disease will get better and better, and we'll be able to see more and more of that. But it is very exciting. In this study, there's just 97 people, and they look at, are there any baseline characteristics that could predict who's more likely to have this response? And you would think high-risk features, not really. The one thing that maybe trended that way was if you had a greater plasma cell percentage in your bone marrow, you're more likely to have a disease progression than a lower percentage of plasma cells in your bone marrow when you get your cells. Which maybe argues, I think the authors say this, that we really should try to maybe use this drug earlier in therapy instead of after one's failed everything. And of course, we have CAR-T4, and we have, there's more and more coming data of using this earlier in therapy. Now, we have idi-cel as well, which is also a chimeric antigen receptor T-cell therapy targeting BCMA or B-cell maturation antigen. And we don't necessarily see big treatment differences between, say, pembrolizumab and nivolumab as PD-1 targeting drugs. Both those drugs tend to work in the diseases that each one works. They have the same target. Well, these drugs have the same target, but there was a recent publication in Blood that hasn't even been formatted yet of several centers got together like, here's who we gave Cilta-Cel to, who we gave idi-cel to for plasma cell leukemia, a really aggressive plasma cell neoplasm. And the Cilta-Cel folks did better. Now, there are several real-world publications in myeloma of Cilta-Cel doing better than idi-cel. It's very, I think, analogous to, we don't have a head-to-head randomized controlled trial of Cilta-Cel versus idi-cel, but we don't have that for apixaban and rivaroxaban. But yet, you look at every study of rivaroxaban compared to a vitamin K antagonist or apixaban versus a vitamin K antagonist, whether it's AFib, VTE, apixaban always ends up looking better, and Cilta-Cel always ends up looking better. And there are a couple of theories maybe behind why Cilta-Cel might be a better drug, and clearly seems to be a better drug than idi-cel, at least with regards to efficacy in myeloma. One, the dosing of Cilta-Cel is 0.5 to 1 times 10 to the 6 cells, and for idi-cel it's 300 to 460 times 10 to the 6, so maybe they're just giving more drug. And I'm sure the dose-finding study said this is the max dose that we can give, so maybe it's a dosing, but they also have different chimeric antigen receptors. Notably, Cilta-Cel has 2 binding sites, so there is some theory and some science behind why Cilta-Cel seems to be the preferred CAR-T product here with Cilta-Cel. So maybe it is time to Cilta-Celebrate here what we have with CAR-T in multiple myeloma targeting BCMA. That is what I have for you this week. I do also want to say, as a callback to the interviews I did with pharmacy students about how seeing an oncology pharmacist and what they can do might inspire you to become an oncology pharmacist. I have a mini-series planned later this fall about different career pathways of how you can, kind of for students or trainees, early career folks, of how you may want to go about your trip to becoming an oncology pharmacist, and talking to folks who have taken different roads traveled and how they've ended up in their oncology pharmacy role. So look for that sometime later this fall around American Pharmacist Week. Hopefully we'll have those ready. Thank you so much for listening. You can follow me on the app formerly known as Twitter at PharmDeepNib, and on other social media platforms at OncoPharmPod. And until I talk to you again, remember, doses matter. you.